Good morning and welcome into another Steelers Saturday Sit Down with Around the 412. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Tyler Weeks. First off, got to give a big shout out to Joe Frick of Around the 412, host the fantasy show with our pal Drew Hannes. But Joe is the reason for this new background. I'm absolutely loving it. I think it looks awesome. Tyler, what do you think?
I think it looks great. I watched you on Tip of the Iceberg podcast. Shout out to those guys, and I was like, we need to step up our game. Our video looks terrible compared to theirs, and so
Yeah.
that's when I texted you, and coincidentally enough, Joe had already been working on it for us. So
Yeah, it was literally, it wasn't even the same thing. Like, don't get me wrong, their format does look sick, but that wasn't why I had been thinking about doing this for a while. I just finally got around to asking Joe if he would do it, and he got
yeah,
us
for
hooked up.
me, the catalyst was seeing you on there, and then seeing how theirs looked, and then looked at how ours looked, and I was like, we need to up our game a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of just black space on the pod before that. So big shout out to Joe for doing that. Tyler, it's already week 5 of the NFL season. This time flies by once we get into football season. Seems like the rest of the calendar just breezes by. So here we sit here. The Steelers just one loss so far, coming off that loss to the Indianapolis Colts. So 3-1 going into the Sunday Night Football matchup with the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of things to talk about injury wise on both sides of the coin here. What are your first thoughts on this matchup?
It is a injured battle that's going to happen on Sunday night. There's a lot of key names that are going to be missing from this game. Micah Parsons, especially on the Dallas side of things, that's a big target that's not going to be there for the Steelers or for the Steelers to have to go against. And I think that there's a good opportunity for the Steelers to take advantage of that, and I think there's a good opportunity for them to run the football. Dallas ranks as the 26th worst team in the NFL when it comes to rushing yards against so far this season. They're averaging close to 150 yards a game allowed. I think the Steelers could have a big bounce back week in terms of their rushing yards and take advantage of that. But it's also hard to see that happening with just an injured Najee Harris, as well as, I mean, you don't have Cordell Patterson, you don't have Jalen Warren. And I think that Justin Fields is going to have to be a big part of this rushing attack on Sunday night. And I think he's going to. We'll get into bold predictions for that. But I think that there's an opportunity still, even with an injured Najee Harris and Justin Fields getting more run on that. I think that there's an opportunity to take advantage of that run defense. Also, Nick Herbig is cleared. Curious to see what he's going to look like against Tyler Guyton and on that left side. And I just think that Dallas has been underwhelming, and I think there's an opportunity there to take advantage of this game. When we made our season predictions, I was accounting for this game as a loss, but I was not accounting for the Colts as a loss. But as the season's played out, I'm not as afraid of Dallas coming into Pittsburgh as I was. And excuse me, I think that, especially with Brandon Cooks out, Dallas is going to be very one-dimensional offensively. It's either throw to CeeDee Lamb or run the football. They don't really have a ton of other options. And so I think that that's going to be kind of easy for us to defend against. But at the same time, our offense is pretty much the same way on the other side of that coin. So it could be easy for them to – I think it's a very similar matchup for both teams to kind of scheme it out the same way. And we're just going to see who comes out on top.
And weather looks like it very well could be a big factor in this one. If that's the case and it's ground versus ground, typically you talk about like strength versus strength, but at least Steelers offense versus Dallas defense in terms of the rushing attack, it's weakness versus weakness because neither one have been good in those two areas. So it's just going to be which team, like Derek pointed this out, one of these teams is going to be feeling a little bit better about themselves, and even though they maybe shouldn't be big picture, and the other team is going to feel absolutely terrible about themselves. Depending on if the Steelers are able to run the football. But to your point, Cordero Patterson, Jalen Warren, neither one going to go in this one, both already rolled out. Huge opportunities for guys like Aaron Shamplin and Jonathan Ward, who are both going to be elevated. It sounds like Shamplin was signed to the 53, but I think Jonathan Ward gets a helmet for this one. And honestly, I'm more excited about him. I think that he's got a lot of juice. I think he's an NFL back. Not trying to take away anything from Aaron Shamplin, but if I was picking a number 2 back from what's left there right now, for me, it would be Jonathan Ward. And I'd give him, 7-ish touches in this one to see if he can do something with them. Shamklin played 13 snaps last week. Not that he touched the ball 13 times, but I would give those to Ward instead of Shamklin, maybe even a bit more, depending on how efficient and effective Najee Harris looks. I don't want to put all the blame on him for the way that last week looked. 13 touches, 19 yards, 13 carries. He did have that one big play in the screen game. But I don't think, to your point, I don't think he's healthy either. Like I do want, if you had Jaylen Warren, if you had Cordell Patterson, if we might see at least a more limited Najee Harris, if not him taking a little bit of a breather as well. No Brandon Cooks for the Dallas side is huge, because you look at the rest of that receiving room. You got Jalen Tolbert, you got Turpin, you got Flournoy, who they're bringing up. It's not a very good wide receiver room behind CeeDee Lamb. And it kind of reminds me of the Pittsburgh wide receiver room, the way that we've talked about them. So I would imagine, I know that you're not going to put this out there ahead of time. I assume that we'll see Joey Porter pretty much shadow CeeDee Lamb. I can't imagine that, you would get away from that too much. You mentioned the Herbig thing. He is coming off of an injury in this last one, but he was able to get in some practice before this game, so he's going to be a go. Jeremiah Moon also coming back off IR practice, so he'd be some nice depth to add behind those guys, and we'll see. They might ease him back in. He might play 5-10 snaps, because you obviously have DeMarvin Leal, who can take some of those snaps away from Watt and Herbig as well. So it'll be interesting to see what that rotation looks like. A lot of talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick and not having the splash plays. I think he's been very good. I don't think that the splash has been there. I think teams are avoiding him, which is what it is. But it's led to guys.
This has been a discussion we've had for the past 5 years. Really, after that first year of Minkah, where he had a ton of splash plays, and then teams smarted up and just let's not throw to that guy. Let's not throw to his half.
Well, he had 6 or 7 picks in 22. Or 21, one of the 2 years. But yeah, there's 2 years that are massive numbers in terms of the ball production. And then other than that, it's been kind of on the lower end just because the team's avoiding him. But the whole idea was to get more players in here that could fill roles, so you didn't know where he was going to be. The good news is they've gotten him out of the box. He's played a total of 12 box snaps all year, and I think it's because Deshaun Elliott has been so good for we talk about PFF in a very negative way for the most part. And don't get me wrong, I still stand to that. But it is pretty telling that they have him on the first quarter of the season, all PFF team, as the strong safety. I think he has been awesome. I think that matches the eye test as well. Deshaun Elliott's been an excellent addition. On the other side of that, Patrick Queen being talked about pretty negatively. I think it's a little bit overblown. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's necessarily been good. I think he's over pursuing a ton. Some of the coverage stuff, to me, more about communication. You can see him throwing his hands up a couple times last week when something went wrong. I'm not necessarily hitting the panic button there yet, at least on him personally. But I do think that he's going to need a bounce back week in order to put some people's minds at ease. And I think that could be this game right here. From a Steelers offensive perspective, we talked about the backs a bit. Isaac Seumalo going to be coming back for this one. I think that's huge, especially when you just lost James Daniels too, to be able to at least get one vet back in there on that left side. And especially for what the Steelers want to do in the run game anyways, I think that it's big to have Seumalo in there. And I think you can get by with Mason McCormick plugging in for James Daniels when you want to be primarily a running football team anyway. Because McCormick, I don't have as much concern about what he is as a run blocker as I do a pass protector. So I think in that respect, I'm excited about Mason McCormick's growth. And it's given him an audition year, because this was kind of the way that I don't want to see James Daniels go down to injury, but we all kind of thought it was going to be Daniels playing out this year, walking, Mason McCormick takes over that spot. Well, now it's just happening earlier than we expected.
Yeah, I think that I thought that too. And something that we didn't talk about or I don't think we mentioned on this week's episode of the Steelers podcast, is that this could have been the last game we've seen of James Daniels for the Steelers. And because of preseason, no contract conversations were being had. So the fact that they're getting to that earlier, it's a better opportunity for Mason McCormick and the Steelers, but it's just unfortunate for James Daniels to be in that situation. However, I do think that the Steelers' offensive line is going to perform better than they did against the Colts, because you've got a lot more certainty going into this week. Who's playing where? Seumalo's coming back. There's not going to be a lot of shuffle with these guys, and you know where they're going to be playing. I want
to add too, I think that the Colts, Grover Stewart He's a very good player. I don't think that Steelers fans realize how good of a player he was, but he was giving the Steelers fits last weekend. And I think Leatu Latu is a better player than anything that the Cowboys have right now because of no Lawrence and no Parsons on the edge.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that having the certainty of who's playing where with the Steelers, and like I said, knock on wood, nobody gets injured. If they all stay at the same spots, I think you're going to see more continuity, and that's going to play better with the run game as well. I think it's going to be more up to Najee this week to just hit the hole hard, and like you mentioned, like I think that Jonathan Ward could get some good touches. He looked really good in the preseason. And so when Champlain was elevated first, that was surprising to me because I thought that Ward looked like the best player in the preseason as far as the backs.
Ward was their best back in training camp, like including the starters didn't do a ton,
but the ones that were actually participating, he looked really good. So that was surprising to me. But I think it's up to Najee to just hit the hole hard this week, not really hesitate and just make a decision and go. But we'll see how that works out. I think that offensively, it's just going to be heavy run game. Like with weather, like what is the weather predicted to be? Is it just rain?
Yeah, some rain.
Mm-hmm. Just rain. I mean,
like the first half of the game.
I would think that that's probably going to just be us running the football a ton. But that's where I want to include Justin Fields more, and that's where I also want to talk about like, do we think that the offense is going to stall out in the beginning of the game? Or do we think that it's going to be a continuation of what we saw last Sunday? Because we kind of had that discussion on our Steelers show this week where they tend to start slow and then the second half they make adjustments and they got better. But we also had the discussion where why would they continue to not call the game the same way from what you saw in the second half? And why would you not just start out the game that way instead of being less conservative? I know that you're not going to be throwing the ball all over the place if it's going to be raining. But why not include Justin Fields earlier on and in the run game himself with some of these quarterback designed runs? Like I think that there's a greater opportunity there to take over this game with the run game using Justin Fields than there is just primarily using your backups. And if you're not using Justin Fields, I feel like that's just doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, I do think that they will try to get him on more designed runs. But you were asking me, do I think it'll be more of a continuation of the second half of last week or what we've seen? I think it's going to be more of what we've seen from them. I mean, I think that's the better bet. Like, I think that it's almost by design though. Like not saying that they don't want to score. I think anybody that thinks the Steelers intentionally don't want to score points are idiots, but they intentionally want to play offense very safe because of what their defense does for them. Like until they have to absolutely open things up and take those risks, they don't. And it's because they don't trust the offensive personnel. And I have a hard time disagreeing with that when I look at the personnel for the most part. I'm very encouraged by the way that Justin's played. Don't get me wrong. I think George Pickens is a good player. I think Pat Freiermuth is a good player. I think Isaac Seumalo is a good player. I think they have some good players. But you look like if your wide receiver 2 is Van Jefferson or Calvin Austin, I can't, fault them for being a little bit more conservative on the offensive side when you have the defense that you do. Wow. Okay. Fields will have 4 touchdowns, says YouTube. Also, I love the name. Very clever. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I think that that's the better bet. But in terms of Fields specifically, in terms of his inclusion in the run game, I think you have to. He's probably your second best running back.
I mean, you saw
your first best running back.
Well, he might be your first best running back if Najee's not able to perform up to his usual stuff. If Najee's getting 2 yards a carry, Justin Fields is your best running back on the team. And I feel like you need to take advantage of that. I think it's foolish if the Steelers don't use him more. You saw last week in the second half how Justin Fields basically by himself took over that game offensively for the Steelers. I don't
Did you see Art Smith's,
why you watched that.
Comments on it?
No, I did not.
I mean, he basically said this, like, I was kind of surprised for him to give that type of praise because it's typically, coaches will be like, oh, it's all about the team. It's a team performance, good or bad. But he was like, yeah, Justin basically took over the game. So, yeah. I mean, he obviously
knowing that he can do that, why would you not do that more? And especially in a game like this where it could get ugly, could get pretty muddy in the field. Like having someone like that you could do designed runs with. I do not understand why you don't utilize that more. They haven't utilized it enough this season. And in his games, Justin Fields has attempts, which do sacks count as rushing attempts in a box score?
It's weird because like they count him in college, like with kneel downs as well. I
Right.
don't know. Yeah, I'm honestly not sure. It might depend on the site.
I'm just looking at Pro Football Reference,
Yeah.
and in his 4 games so far, so he's been sacked at least 2 times in each of the games, 4 times against the Colts. But in his first week, surprisingly enough, he had the most rushing attempts as a Steeler, 14, 8 the following week in Denver, 6 against the Chargers, 10 against Indianapolis. So he was able to take over the game in that way and make it feel like that with 10 rushing attempts.
Well, Atlanta was the only game where I
And
felt like that was like supposed to be included. Like that's the only game where I felt like it was intentional.
yeah, and I think that it needs to be more intentional. Like I think that you should be having at least 15 rushing attempts with Justin Fields. And maybe that's too many for some people. You don't want to risk an injury, but the fact that he is your best player offensively with the ball in his hands just to make a run with it, I am fine doing that. And in a game where you're not going to be able to throw the ball that well, in a game where you are real, and even if you're throwing the ball well, you're only relying on George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth. You're not relying on anybody else. I mean, you're probably relying more on Darnell Washington than you are on Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin. So I think that if you're not having many targets to be thrown to, I mean, we'll see what George Pickens does against an injured Trayvon Diggs. I know he's got that ankle injury. He's still questionable for the game. If he plays, I imagine George Pickens is still going to get his own against Trayvon Diggs. But I just think with weather-wise, how much are they actually going to be actually being able to take advantage of that and throw the ball to him? So if they're doing that, open it up with Justin Fields. It makes no sense to me why they don't.
On the other side, you got Deron Bland, and both those guys, honestly, Diggs and Bland are guys that you can get, but they'll get you too. They'll give up their yards, but they're going to take the ball the other way as well. So, you got to be calculated with that, obviously. I think Diggs is going to play. He's one of those rare cases that I don't think he needs to practice on Friday because he went backwards in terms of his practice participation. Like Wednesday there was nothing about it. Thursday limited in practice, then Friday DNP. But I don't know if it was Jerry Jones or Steven Jones. One of them said like, yeah, he's going to be fine. So
yeah, I love the Diggs. His rookie year, or after his rookie year, he had the most interceptions in the NFL, and he had the most yards given up in the NFL.
Yeah, he gave up like 1,100 yards.
As all things should be.
Yeah, it was like 11 picks.
Yeah,
he also gave up like
11 picks. He gave up 100 yards per pick.
I don't know. Do you take that trade off? I guess it depends on how many touchdowns were included.
I mean, it depends on. I think it depends on also how many or how much your offense is, or your defense is playing around him too. Because I mean, look at the early last season. The Steelers were letting up yards to a top receiver every single week, but they were managing to still win the game and look good defensively overall. It's just they were giving up yards to the team's number one receiver. If that's happening, then I guess you can live with it if you still have the rest of the Steelers defense around you. Like if that's what Joey Porter turned into, then I guess you take it.
We're going to talk about Joey in a little bit because I made my bold predictions not taking into consideration the weather because I didn't know that it was supposed to be like crappy. And maybe that will change, 24 hours out. Cowboys DBs jump routes a ton. They hit Pickens deep on a double. I hope they hit Pickens deep on a double move. That's been talked about too, is hitting Pickens deep because he had 11 targets last week. He ran like 20 some routes. But of those 11 targets that he had, only 3 were go or 9 routes. And, people were talking about, do they need to take more deep shots down the field? I don't get me wrong. I'm definitely somebody that was in favor of the expanded route tree, like George wanting to do more things than just run deep and throw the ball up to him. I do think you got to take more than 3 deep shots just because of how successful they've been. Like anytime Justin throws deep to George, I just assume it's going to be completed. And for the most part, it has been. It's either been completed or been a penalty, whether that's on us or them. So there's been a result that's not turning the football over for sure, at least. But yeah, with the success that they've had doing so, Justin's very accurate to that part of the field. I think they got to take those shots, and it's more about the timing of them. Like I think early in the game, I would like to see them even first or second play of the game. Say they have like a, 6+ yard run to open the game, second down, I'm taking that shot. So I don't know. I think it's more about the timing for me than anything else.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that they've done it this season. We just haven't seen it actually come to fruition a lot because of things getting called back, or unfortunately last week a fumble happening inside the 5-yard line. But
yeah, which was George himself.
That
else
was
to blame.
I mean, I just want to know, like, if I can ask him, like, who taught you to hold the football like that when you're surrounded by 3 guys?
See, for us, it's like Shady McCoy, right? It used to drive me nuts the way he would hold a football. But somebody brought up like an older example to me on a podcast that I was on this past week of a player that used to do that too. I can't remember who the back was, but anyway, for us, it's Shady McCoy.
Looks like to me the Steelers got a franchise QB for free.
I mean, I'm very encouraged by what Justin has looked like for sure. You know, I'm just not all the way there yet, but don't get me wrong. He's played better than I expected him to up to this point, and I'm very encouraged by it, to the point where, like I said, last week, I thought he was the offense. Like, without him, I have no clue what that team would have done in that football game. So, yeah, very encouraged by Justin. I think it's very possible. I like this one.
Yeah, Matt, I love the comment.
Oh yeah,
I was just saying, Matt, I love the comment, but I just want to see more of it.
Let me ask you,
they go an entire season, then I don't know that I would call him the franchise quarterback yet, but they could have their quarterback of their near future for the first few seasons. I don't want to jump the gun on franchise quarterback because I feel like a lot of us did that with Kenny Pickett, and then look how that turned out. So don't want to say that yet, but I think that there's a lot of signs pointing to good things with Justin Fields with the Steelers.
Let me ask you, because it was put out there, you know, the man in Pittsburgh, Andrew Filipponi, put this out. If the Steelers were willing to break their trend, not even a trend, it's just historically they don't do it, of signing players in season, they could get Justin to sign a 2-year deal worth $50 million. Would you sign him to that right now?
2-year worth $50 million?
Yeah, so 25 per for the next 2 seasons.
I mean, maybe I'm undervaluing him, but that seems like a lot to me. Correct me, is that a lot? Like that seems like a lot to me.
I would sign that yesterday. I mean, think like just quarterback contracts. Let's just take a look.
I guess that's true if you compare him to other quarterback contracts, and maybe it's just because I'm thinking of him not like a franchise guy. Literally, like I guess you could sign that.
Yeah, let me pull this up just because I want to be looking at average here. So quarterbacks that are making about 25 million, or at least in that range, 25 million would put him. Oh crap, that wasn't just on quarterbacks. Give me 1 sec.
I'm curious who's on this list because I know the big names all make a lot more than that. But
yeah, I mean, well, Daniel Jones makes 40, right? But you're not trying.
Yeah, but the Giants are just a bunch of morons.
Derek Carr makes 37.5. Baker Mayfield makes 33. Geno Smith makes 25. So that would put him in with Geno Smith in that territory. That's probably maybe the best comp money wise. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're comparing him to Geno, the problem is asking this question right now versus I want to see the whole season. Because if he plays out the season and collapses, then that's a different story.
I mean, there's a drastic drop off. Like Geno Smith's making 25. The next guy is Gardner Minshew, who's making who signed a 2-year, $25 million contract. Sam Darnold might be the best value at the position right now.
Oh, dude, Sam Darnold, what a
1 year,
comeback.
$10 million. Yeah, it's pretty awesome to see. The franchise tag would be 50-some million. I mean, because it's top 5, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 quarterbacks making 50+ million. Then you got Kyler, Deshaun, Kirk, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Stafford, and Jones making at least 40. Rodgers and Carr at 37.5, Mayfield at 33, Geno at 25. So 25 million would make him 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. tied for the 20th highest paid quarterback.
I mean, I don't hate it. Maybe I'm just thinking about contracts the wrong way. Maybe I'm just thinking like contracts aren't that expensive.
I mean, to me,
they are.
I know that it's a 4-game sample size. To me, he's playing like a top 12 quarterback right now, and you're talking about paying him as the 20th.
I guess from that standpoint, you do it. And 2 years isn't too long. Where
I wouldn't do it if I'm Justin. I don't know why he would do it. Because if you continue to play like this, you're going to blow that number out of the water. And why would you only do it for 2 years? And
you're going to be a free agent after the season, so you might have options outside of Pittsburgh too.
Yeah. If I'm the Steelers, like Allen said, if the Steelers should get him at $25 million, Omar should just be waiting for him at his locker every day after practice with the contract until he signs it.
I guess that's smart.
Because and then the number's gonna more and more guys are gonna sign contracts. Like, okay, I just mentioned that it's the 20th. Like Sam Darnold continues to play like this, he's gonna make over 25 on his next.
Yeah, I mean Sam Darnold might win the MVP.
CJ Stroud's gonna sign a deal within the next couple of years. There's quarterbacks that are gonna come up and sign new contracts. So yeah,
that's very true. Maybe I'm just like thinking in like an archaic mind of contracts. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because it's like that number sounds large.
It sounds like a lot until you compare it to everybody else. And I knew like Mahomes, Allen, like there was a ton of names at the top that are way above that. But I guess when you compare him to his peers, it's not that bad.
Let's talk about getting Justin another weapon in here. Nick says Romeo Doubs, future Steeler. Talked a lot this week about Davante Adams on the Around the 412 Steelers show, the normal podcast. Be sure to go check that out if you haven't watched or listened yet. In terms of that fit and, would we do it? Romeo Doubs, very interesting how that seems to be playing out in Green Bay, because you had to figure something was going to give, right? Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed. Who else is in that room? There's another wide receiver that I'm missing. Dontavian Wicks. Like those four are like all the same, like within 2 years, 3 years, they were all drafted of each other, all relatively similar. You've had to figure something was going to give. Dobbs is like third on the team in targets, and he's played the most amount of snaps, but apparently he's like unhappy with his role within that receiving game. So he didn't practice the last 2 days of the week. Doesn't sound like he's going to play on Sunday. He's very unhappy. Is this a shot worth taking if you're the Steelers, assuming that the Davante Adams thing doesn't work out? He goes to the Jets or somewhere else.
I think so. If you can get Romeo Doubs in here, pretty much I say this all the time. We say this all the time, but pretty much anybody would come in and be wide receiver 2 right away. Like it's not even a question.
He's at least operated as a 2. Yeah,
but he for sure would. And the fact that you could get him, he's unhappy with his targets. He's going to get targets here, and that's going to be something their defenses would at least have to pay potentially less attention to George Pickens now, because you bring in a player like that. I would be for sure interested if I'm the Steelers. I'd at least kick the tires and see what the asking cost would be for him, because if he's unhappy and he's skipping practice, like how long can the Packers truly wait if that's going to be continuing to happen? Because I feel like the longer that prolongs, the more the asking cost has to go down. So if that's something that the Packers are going to inevitably have to do, they'd want to do that sooner than later. And from the Steelers standpoint, same thing. You don't want to wait until the trade deadline comes to get a receiver. You want to get one now. So do it sooner than later. And if you're able to figure something out, that's awesome, because that's a young wide receiver that has a lot of pedigree to him and can be a good wide receiver 2 for you right away. You know what kind of receiver you're getting, and there's going to be no question that he's going to be an impact player.
I'll be honest, I'd have to go back. I'd have to go watch some tape to know if he's a good blocker, but at 6'2", 205, you'd think that he would at least be possible, that he's a good blocker. Yeah. I'm not saying all bigger body receivers are.
Does he have to be good, or does he just have to be better than Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin?
Yeah, very true. You look at his career so far, he's in his third year, his first 2 years in the league. Year 1, 67 targets, 42 receptions, 425 yards, 3 touchdowns. Year 2, 96 targets, 59 receptions, 674 yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. And then this year, just 4 games so far, but he only has 20 targets, 12 receptions, 169 yards, and has not scored a touchdown yet. So even though he's playing, I guess that's probably what, like, he's not been part of the the game plans. He's not getting the ball, even though he's playing the snaps.
I mean, he could come in right now with the Steelers and probably beat his second year yards total of 674 yards, just because he would get enough targets to do that.
Eight touchdowns though. He had 8 touchdowns that second year.
Eight touchdowns. That, I mean, I don't know that he'd beat that, but I think the yardage and the targets are very comfortable for what he could get, just because there's not a lot of people to throw to in Pittsburgh. You've got George, you got Pat, and then you got a bunch of people on the street, pretty much.
There's a lot of people clamoring for Darnell to be a bigger part of it, and I think in waves he can be, but like we talked about it before, we don't think he's like a quantity guy. Like he's not a quantity receiver.
I just see him as a red zone guy. If he's a big body in the red zone, that's where you should target him. In the middle,
that play was sick last week, though.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was for sure, but I don't envision him being involved a ton between the 20s. Once you get inside the red zone, it's kind of just one of those scenarios where you're bigger than the guy. Just throw it up, and he'll come down with it.
Yeah, absolutely. What else did I want? Oh, I texted, the person that I always text when it comes to if the Steelers are going to be rumored for somebody or whatever. I think I mentioned on the Around the 4 and 2 Steelers show about the Davante Adams thing. I don't remember the timeline of things, but I texted them. I was like, hey, do you think that they'll offer a third? And they just said yes. Like the Steelers would definitely trade a third for Davante Adams. I asked them about Dobbs, and they said it's interesting. Think that they will be interested in him, but not having that fourth or planning to not have that fourth because of the Fields trade makes it a little bit more difficult. Like, would a fifth be enough? But a third seems too high. So it puts them in an interesting spot. Like you have to do multiple picks with the higher one being in 2026 to do it. Or like, how do you get that done with that? Because a fourth seems like fair value probably, but you don't have that pick.
Yeah, I would prefer to do the higher pick in the latter year. If you're doing multiple picks, do a fifth this year, and then a third next year. But I don't know. I think that I'm just like, when you get past the third round, I'm not valuing picks the same way as I am a real player. So even if it was this year, yeah, your draft capital would suck, but I don't think that's ultimately
on that fourth. Well, Peyton Wilson's a third, I guess, technically, but like Herbig in the fourth, like I'm not saying not to trade it. Like I would trade it for a proven commodity, but I'm just saying I think with Omar, we gotta look at the picks a little bit differently than Kevin Colbert. Like I think that they hold more value in Omar's hands than later year Kevin. Yeah,
100%. But I just think like player to player, if you can get Davante Adams and like, I know we kind of have to just look at this for what.
Oh, wait, hold on. I was talking about with Dobbs.
Oh, with Dobbs. Okay.
Davante Adams, they would trade their third in 2025. Yeah. With Dobbs, they were saying it was a little bit tougher because they value him in the fourth, but they're planning to not have that fourth.
Right.
Because of the Justin Fields trade.
Yeah. So if you're trading for Dobbs, you kind of have to value him differently, where you're not just getting a player that can impact your team this year, you're getting one for the future. And we've saw like even like Roman Wilson this past year, he hasn't played yet for the Steelers. So people that are in even the third round, they aren't necessarily making an immediate impact. And once you get past that point, you don't know what it's going to be. Albeit aside, I know Omar Khan has done good in the fourth round. But
especially with more and more underclassmen sticking around because of NIL and stuff. So like the draft has gotten harder on day three.
I just think that I value active NFL players that have played snaps in the NFL more than I am a potential pick, because you don't know what that player is going to be. We've seen what Romeo Dobbs is. That's where I'm at with it.
Sure. Okay. Before we get out of here, let's we've kind of gone on bigger picture stuff all of a sudden, but let's go back to this matchup with the Cowboys, get some predictions before we get out of here. You know the drill. We got to have some bold predictions in here along with a score prediction. If you watch Afternoon Drive, Friday's episode, Steelers DB Derek Bell joining me, I kind of already put out my predictions, but I will regurgitate them on this show, but I'll let you go first, Tyler.
Okay. So for first bold prediction, I kind of alluded to this earlier in the game, or earlier in the show. It involves Justin Fields. Running the football. I think Justin Fields is going to rush for over 100 yards in this game. And I think that part of that has to do with I think that he's going to be the main option for rushing the football. I don't think that Najee Harris is going to be a full go, even though he is their RB1 for this game. He's definitely still dealing with an injury. And I don't know as far as like what Jonathan Ward is going to do, how much of an impact he's going to have. I think that they're going to utilize Justin Fields' legs. And I think that Justin Fields is going to utilize his own legs as well, even if it's not a designed run. I think that
it would be his sixth 100-yard rushing game. He has 5 so far.
Yeah, 100 yards on the ground. And the type of game that we're setting up for, I don't remember who they were playing, but I've seen Justin Fields play in the rain. I think it was a season opener one year.
Yeah, against San Fran.
Was it against San Fran? And that infamous video of him sliding up and then like flexing in the end zone after they win. Yeah, I want that type of game from Justin Fields, over 100 yards rushing for him. And then on flipping it to the defensive side of the ball, I think that Joey Porter Jr. holds CeeDee Lamb to under 60 yards receiving. And I think that that's a bold prediction based off of recent performance from Joey Porter Jr. You kind of seen him have slip-ups the past couple of games, but I think that it's going to be a sloppy football game, so they're not going to be throwing it a ton. But I still think that the Cowboys are going to try to get CD the ball. He's their best player offensively, and I think that Joey Porter Jr. is going to have a bounce-back week and play better with him. Offensive line and running backs got to get healthy. Steelers will be scary when healthy.
So, like the running backs can. Jaylen Warren dealing with a sprained PCL. He'll be back within the next week or two. Like they've talked about, either Vegas or the Jets is the date they're circling for him to come back.
I think your offensive line. I think you're about to see your offensive line for the season in this game.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, how are they going to? 3 of them are out for the year. Like who we talked about getting healthy. Dylan Cook's going to be back, but like he's not going to be a starter anyway. Like I think this is what you got, and hopefully this is what you got. Hopefully this is the last offensive line combination we see, because you hope that these guys now can stay healthy. But as far as getting healthy, you're going to get the backs back. Jaylen Warren within the next couple of weeks. Cordell Patterson has a really weird injury. It's not a high ankle sprain. They're calling it a mid-lateral ankle sprain. So he'll be back within the next couple of weeks as well. It's funny because like we could get, if you can survive these next 2 weeks and beat Dallas and Vegas, and then going into that Jets game Sunday night, that's the date they're talking about for Alex Highsmith. And then it could be the date we get back Warren and Patterson as well.
Yeah, I think the offensive line, you're pretty much cooked as far as not necessarily your line goes. No, I don't think you're cooked as far as your line goes, but as far as wanting to rearrange it, there's not going to be a lot of shuffling anymore. So you're going to see the same guys for hopefully pretty much the rest of the season. Running backs, I think there's a lot to be desired with what we've seen from the running backs so far. Getting Jaylen Warren back, getting Cordell Patterson back, that would be great for the Steelers offense. Getting Jaylen Warren to full health and being able to see what he's done. We haven't seen it all season. You see what type of impact player he has, and especially knowing that this is probably Najee Harris's last year in Pittsburgh uniform. We were all talking about this offseason how he was going to be the running back of the future for the Steelers for the next several seasons. We haven't seen him at all this season, so you'd like to at least see him be more productive in the incumbent year for him as the Steelers' future running back. But we'll see how he comes back from his health. Hopefully he does get healthy. As a score prediction goes, I'm going to say the Steelers are going to win this one, and I think that they win it comfortably, but they don't like just absolutely blow them out. I'm going to say 24-15.
All right. Offensive prediction. Do I want to change up? No, I can't change up. I'll go with the same thing. So I'm going to say that George Pickens has his second most receiving yards in a game. The reason I was thinking about switch up is because the weather has changed, or at least I actually saw what it was supposed to be like. So the most that he's had in a game, 195 against the Cincinnati Bengals last year. His second most is like 131. Like there's a nice spot within there that this number could fall in for sure. So I'm going to say that he has the second most receiving yards in his NFL career tomorrow. My second bold prediction, I thought you were going to say it when you talked about Joey Porter. He should have had 2 last week. He gets 1 this week. He gets his hands on the ball, actually completes the interception this time as opposed to just getting a PBU or deflection. Joey Porter Jr. gets an interception. Final score, 27-20. The Pittsburgh Steelers take down the Dallas Cowboys at home.
You got to think that there's going to be a lot of targets to Joey Porter Jr.'s side if he's shadowing CeeDee Lamb. Even if it is raining, like I said, offensively, CeeDee's their best player, and they're going to try to get him the ball there's going to be a ton of targets going his way. So I like that pick. I think that there's
the thing is though, like
get one.
Even with that, like because you're not unless you're like Tolbert or Turpin or Flournoy, like make them change their minds in game because of the way they're performing. Man, just use Minka, have him help out. Like you could basically double cover CeeDee Lamb, unless one of those guys prove you wrong throughout the course of the game. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that this matchup favors the Steelers because of what I've seen from the Dallas Cowboys so far this year. But I thought that the matchup last week against Indy favored the Steelers as well. So nothing's a given.
And they're coming back home, so they get to play in front of a home crowd at night. I feel like a night atmosphere in Pittsburgh is a good atmosphere to be in. However, how are you going to handle the rain?
I don't mind it.
What's going to be the outfit setup for you?
I don't know, because it's not going to be super cold yet either. I was hoping to wear my new Unreal Steelers windbreaker, but I don't know if I can. I mean, I might still, because it's going to be nice for the water resistance. So we'll see. I don't know yet though. I haven't decided.
Well,
let us know if you're going to be at the game.
Not too bad for you.
In the comments, if you're watching this back or listening back, we appreciate you guys joining for sure. We always appreciate the comments in the live chat. Love the questions, whether they be, smaller picture stuff about this matchup or bigger picture, such as Romeo Doubs or Devontae Adams becoming a Pittsburgh Steeler. Would love to see either one come to the black and gold. At this point, I'm just begging for any crumbs that we can get. So subscribe, hit that notification bell.
Like we said on our Steelers episode, we are literally begging on our hands and knees for almost any receiver that has a pulse.
I mean, Drew was talking about Bo Melton playing ahead of him, Dobbs. Even if they want to trade as Bo Melton, yeah, go ahead, send him over. I don't care.
Like I would 36-year-old Adam Thielen or however old he is, I'd be down on my hands and knees when he gets healthy.
As soon as he gets off IR,
please come back. Please come to the Steelers.
So if you are watching this back, we appreciate that as well, and leave your score predictions as well as your thoughts on anything that we talked about on this episode. We appreciate that. Follow us on everything at Around the 412. And I think that's it. For Tyler, for Smitty, thanks for joining us for another Steelers Saturday SitDAHN, and we'll see you next week to preview the game against the Las Vegas Raiders. Until then, bye-bye.